Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thriving LDS Singles. And today we have Kim, who is doing the introduction and doesn't normally do that. And our guest today is Ray. Hi, Ray.
Thank you. Hi.
Ray has been on before. We just did an interview with Ray, but we are having him back, and Kay is on the road. We were hoping Kay could join us, but her internet's giving us trouble. So she might make it for once she gets everything figured out.
And she lives in a big country, so she's driving a long way wherever she's going.
Yeah. She's on a road trip with her grandson in Australia. So I'm sure she's having a great time. And today I'm pretty excited. This is probably going to be a multi-part series, but we're just going to cover the basics today. And the topic is our personal brand and defining and applying our personal brand in relationships and in dating and thinking celestial.
Great topic.
So both Ray and I have a background in business. And so when he told me this was one of his ideas for doing a presentation, I was all over it because I love applying business concepts to my personal life and could think of all kinds of ways to apply it. But Ray, maybe you can give us just a quick synopsis of some of your thoughts or what prompted you to think about the topic. And
Thank you. One of the things I have always felt is that a lot of times your career and things you're directed to are driven by any number of things, but those things also make up a large part of your personality. One of the things I have really been impressed with, though, is that when you look at marketing, we're trying to all determine what is the best outcome, not only for ourselves, certainly, a lot of self-interest, but the good products, the good things when you market properly are sold with the intent to help somebody else move forward. And the intent too is that you actually are able to provide an opportunity for those persons to accumulate more value because of your relationship or your product or your service. And that's what prompted me to kind of move in this area.
so when you say that, you mean as a couple, when you join together, kind of like the power couple concept of when you actually find a partner and you both bring out the best in each other, then you're making a pretty valuable product to contribute to the world and everyone, right?
Yep, spot on. I think that's true. I think that's the eventual objective behind what this is. But first, you have to start the validation of your individual situation. And for example, marketing is really all about your personal brand. One of the things Kim and I talked about a little bit before, and I'll turn this on again. I realized it was there.
Turned it off so it wouldn't beep, and now we want it on.
Now I need it on for a purpose.
So if it beeps, please ignore it.
Please ignore it. Or we'll edit it out, one of the two. But when you think about your personal brand, think about the fact that it is your personality. It is an impact that you make on somebody, somehow, somewhere. It determines oftentimes how you get a job. It determines how your relationships are sometimes. Many times it was actually forged by the way you grew up and you just accepted the growing up experience. And other times you totally denied the growing up experience, have made a total change, and by so doing have totally changed the brand to something totally different.
Rebranded yourself different from your family culture.
And that part of the tribe you've been part of becomes a real interesting factor too. Was the tribe a good part as you're growing up, or was it something that was perhaps less attractive than it should have been? For example, in terms of psychology and branding, there are some companies that use use yellow. So if somebody is trying to wear a yellow dress or a yellow shirt, what perhaps might be the case is there's optimism, there's warmth, and there's clarity. A couple of firms that do that, it's hard to believe. McDonald's, they try and do that, and Best Buy, they try and do that. I tease with Kim that, it's important that if you have a red dress on, men are definitely going to keep an eye on you. They look at you because red is something that draws attention and color. Red, however, is bold, power, and excitement. And the two that are brought up here is Marvel and Kmart.
And
So,
of course I said, well, maybe you don't want to be portraying that personal brand of
and that's totally,
power and excitement. And so maybe your style is different and that's totally okay.
and that would be neutral, which is calm, balanced,
What's
and
pink, Ray? What,
Apple,
what am I portraying? Is it
Apple
down there?
computer. Let's see if they've got pink and purple, creative, wise, imaginative,
Hey, that's me.
Taco Bell and Yahoo.
Oh, Taco Bell.
So there you go. Those are two that have used it very successfully, but that's the mindset they're trying to do. So that sometimes the color that we wear oftentimes is driven by not only our personality, but what we like, and that can be two different things. And or the importance and value is how you present yourself to somebody else is somewhat a major factor of your personality. So
Yeah.
you might want to really understand who you are first and then brand yourself accordingly.
Yeah. And I have two things to say about understanding who you are. So first is when we're talking about personal brand, but we're not talking about creating a false persona. So, so whatever you're presenting should be authentic. And then that leads me to my second point, which is we have, as singles in this community, we have all been through some really tough stuff. And we may not be feeling the best about ourselves and where we are at in life. We may have suffered some real setbacks and in many cases had to start over later in life and have gone through some real challenges. So don't be too hard on yourself either. And really try and just be self-aware and don't get discouraged. You have a place to start from and a place to, things you can always build and improve and grow. And so just embrace and honor where you're at and then decide what you want to be and how you want to portray yourself and make it authentic.
Yeah, one of the great things I've enjoyed about visiting with Kim and Kay is that as professionals, they actually do this in a career level too. So that if somebody was actually interested to have them give you some insight as to some of these thoughts, I would say get hold of them and to learn about their process, their program, and see if it's something you'd be interested in, and maybe become a client of theirs and really enjoy the experience.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But
One thought too I'll also mention is that in marketing this personal brand, all we have at first is what we see. And since everything is so visual right now in terms of the original aspect of thing, whether it's on internet, whether you are watching us, there's a visual thing that you are determining and making judgments on. So we need to be mindful of that should not probably be all of it, but we certainly know that's going to be part of the attraction. The second thing is, and I think Kim really points it out beautifully in just a second ago, is it real? Is it authentic? Are you being your authentic self? And then what happens is, are you willing to put the effort in and say, let's find out? This is where it gets exciting and fun. They call that a date. And so
sometimes that's exciting. And
sometimes it can be very exciting.
sometimes it's scary and that's okay too. But
yeah, it's kind of funny. Before Kim and I were looking at some things on the internet as far as app dating, things like that. And I just happened to mention to one that apparently sent her something, and it looked to me like a guy was a serial killer. So
to be clear, I was showing him my profile on Mutual.
Yeah. Well, her profile is lovely. But
the people that I get to pick from popped up, and I asked him, "Would you date that guy?"
If I want to be found in the woods in a bag, I think I would. But I don't think he didn't exude to me the confidence and tribal instincts that she really ought to be associated with. But that's just me. Some people like real adventure.
But if it's authentic, I guess you have to go with what you have and work from there.
That's right. That's a very good observation.
But you could pay more attention to how you're presenting yourself, maybe, and at least smile, for goodness sake.
Yes. Yes.
Take off the sunglasses. That's my tip for profile.
Yeah, take off the sunglasses. The window to the soul is the eyes. And
this is true.
Fellows, they need to see that. They need to see a smile occasionally. That's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even for the guys, I'm telling you, it's important that you actually have an appearance that shows that you actually are taking some time and interest in yourself, whether you're outside doing a road trip, you're on your bike, you're swimming, you're running, jogging, at least look authentic in terms of, does it fit right? Is it looking attractive on your body? And I
Yeah.
think sometimes that's a factor that men don't think about. They're more into comfort. Yes, that's important, but to be as stylish as possible is going to be a little bit of an attraction because they do look at us that way from that perspective.
Yeah. And we're not saying, go out and do
No,
Botox and dye your hair and all those things to make your appearance look better. We're saying just take care of yourself and make an effort, to keep your hair brushed and dress in some clothes that are good, nice fitting and
brush your teeth. Little
brush your
cologne's not a
teeth.
bad idea. Showering on a regular basis is going to be a really positive. Check your earwax, hair in your ear, hair in your nose, watch your eyebrows. Some of the
I
fellows I
love
used to get a
those
kick out of have
tips.
those, yeah. Get the unibrow, it just kind of connects all at one level. And I used to love most of the pictures I remember when I was growing up was had all these eyebrows that were never clipped. But that also becomes man grooming is certainly an important part of it too, is in terms of throwing out your best appearance. And I
Yeah.
think that's really a quality self and a respecting the fact that your body's a temple, so you might as well take care of the temple. I mean,
Yeah.
every temple I've ever seen has got beautiful gardening. They've got beautiful
So true.
appointments. Things are
If
properly
you've
done.
ever cleaned in the temple, they're meticulous
They have
about
a
how you go
plan.
about that.
Yeah,
And that's what we should be doing.
they totally have a plan. And I think these are also qualities we identify with. I think things that you think are attractive many times fall in line with these same types of things we just mentioned. And a lot of times when it comes down to branding, the question really is the decision to buy, the
Yeah.
decision to ask her out, the decision to make an effort to say hello. I think that's important. I think that that's the first effort that you have to build up a little courage sometimes to make that step.
Yeah.
And good experience, if it is a good experience, the key is you keep on buying and you keep on having those other good experiences. What I also point out too is that if you have a bad experience, well, then you stop and then you move forward with some other plan or some other situation. If it's really bad, here's the problem that runs into, and all of us have this potential issue against us, is that other people will talk about that because we always talk
Yeah.
about in a branding situation, which brand did not deliver on what it said it would do. And if
And
it's
it's a small world.
it's
It's
a
a small community in the singles community. I mean, there's a lot of us, but when it comes to stuff like this, it gets very small.
very small group. So if it's real bad, the thing is that, and here's the part that's a sad part is that they begin to tell others about it and say, oh no. And because you've had this experience with a product.
Mhm.
You've had an experience, somebody says, hey, I'm thinking about buying this particular vehicle or this situation. And your comment is, oh no, I had two of those. I would never have another one as far as I'm concerned. And yet, lemons do exist. You might have caught that particular one twice. And if that's the case, I'm sorry. But the reality is that we don't want to be, first of all, we don't want to be talking about other people in a gossipy setting, but it does happen. And so
Mhm.
therefore, to try and avoid that is probably helpful. And, handling some of these things we talked about up to this point, modify a few things. A lot of times guys will keep the same haircut they've had ever since they were 9. Well, that all may be good and true, but you don't have the same hair you had at 9, if you have hair at all. Females probably ought to look at the same thing. If
Yeah, I was gonna
in
say
terms of
that's true
taking,
for us too.
yeah, it works for both of us in terms of my wife, for example, for years had long hair. I loved it. And if she were alive today, I'd still probably love it. But she found out that because of in raising children and I just her lifestyle the way it was, she went short and it worked out great. I loved it too. Looked
Yeah.
as good on it as anything else. And so you kind of find your way, you find your lifestyle, you find your event.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's time for a change.
Yeah. I've had trouble giving up my 80s bangs, but they are a little tamer now than than in the 80s.
Yeah, the bangs were the thing. That's very true. And they were such a great attraction.
But the point about you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on when you were talking about that. Now I've lost it.
Well, let me just add something. This will bring it back to you. As we talk about visual, we're talking about the appeal. And when you look at brands, The appeal is, again, oftentimes by color. So that could be the dress, in essence, of a date, or it could be just the style of, could even be sometimes rouge or makeup, depending on the sister. The other thing is that actually times we associate the appeal with the reflection of what the product is or the person. That may or may not be true, but it's important to know that though they do exist.
I remembered.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to interrupt before we go too far. So we were talking about how if someone has a bad experience, and we all know this, if you have a bad review of when you're upset with a product, you want to share. And when it's, just okay, then we usually aren't so good at spreading the word, but that may be something to think about. Maybe we should share positive experiences more too. But the other thing to keep in mind is you really don't have control over it. All you can do is your best.
Yeah.
So be kind, be loving with each other, and be direct. Don't him hog. I'm not a big fan of ghosting or, I just let people know what's going on. And sometimes you maybe have to give that a little thought, and it might take you a while to respond so that you know how to, so you be kind. And then how it gets interpreted or used or what people do with it is totally out of your control. And so that's just where who you are and you're confident and you know what your brand is and what your values are. And whatever happens after that is out of your control and you can't worry about it. So let it go,
Great counsel. I think a personal brand too is a key element in the success you'll have in dating. I think it's also a success that you'll have in terms of knowing who you are and have done the homework relative to, look at your past, your experience, your situation, make some adjustments. And I think that's the key is we're always in a position of flux. And the key behind that is to make sure we're moving in a positive way. One of the exciting things that I think happens too is just to making sure that you got your value proposition. And one of the things Kim and I talked about beforehand was I think the dating sites have done a wonderful thing because they give you a pro forma where you can actually write down things that are of interest and of value to you.
Yeah, a template. They give you a
template. A template, yeah. And because of that template, you don't necessarily have to even do the application and be part of their activity. But the key is to get those questions and get them answered, and to have that as kind of like your template, if you will. Thank you.
Yeah.
And to make sure that that's something that you actually agree with and have identified who you are. Knowing yourself, I love that about Hamlet when Polonius makes a statement, "To thine own self be true." Mm-hmm. And I think that's the real key. Are we doing that?
Yeah. And you don't have to share that with anyone. You don't have to go out and actually physically create a dating profile if you're not comfortable with that, but just going through the questions. I will say if you're going to make the effort to make a profile, that I think it says a lot about a person if they take the time and effort to actually give thoughtful answers. So, if you leave all that stuff out, don't bother creating the profile because just a picture or two doesn't really share what you're all about. And so if you're going to go to the effort to do a profile, give it some thought and put some effort into it because that goes a long way, I think.
I think that's, again, good counsel.
And the other thing you mentioned about us all growing is another, I think, important thing. Kay and I have talked about this, especially in the LDS community, or say you're in an experience where you were in a family ward and you knew that person when they were married, or you have some other experience with somebody. I think we want to be gracious or generous in acknowledging that people do change and people do grow and give people a chance. I mean, if there's an indication that they haven't changed, or a behavior you knew that what you really didn't care for and you had some hesitance about going out with somebody, give them a chance. But if it's still there, then okay, you can just make a decision to go another way. But I think everybody grows. We believe in forgiveness for a reason. And so we need to be gracious and generous in those situations when we hear those stories in the first place.
I totally agree. I think one thing too is that a lot of times we go to church, we'll see somebody that we know is single for whatever reason, and they always sit alone or in packs. And because of that, it's important, I think, that we as just general members of the church extend some fellowship, show a little love, acknowledgement that they're there. You just never realize what a smile or a hello and welcome and good to see you will do in terms of somebody's personal perspective of themselves. And the fact if they keep coming and all of a sudden nobody says anything, they'll feel isolated, even though they're in a room of brothers and sisters. So take it upon yourself to be a little more outgoing and use that type of fellowship to not only enhance your capacity, because getting outside of yourself is certainly going to be important when it gets to be something if you're looking for romantic interest, to have some creative questions perhaps that might stimulate conversation. It's going to be important to just kind of think some of these things through. And then I think the other side really is to act.
Yeah.
The Lord
Yeah.
loves motion. He loves action. He loves to see people doing something with what they have thought about. And even that scriptural reference that says he needs to have men and women who will act of their own kind and are not always demanded to do something.
Yeah. And we've been going for a while, so we definitely want to do more parts, but you didn't really get a chance to talk about the product side of things. Is there like some key things as in terms of you being the product and how to think of that?
Yeah, and that might be something as we go through more of, but just as a teaser, the beautiful thing about the product is that Heavenly Father's already identified us, as says it frequently in scriptural reference. And he says his whole goal in the book of Moses is to bring about the eternal life of man, woman as well. And in so doing, it's important that we actually learn then ourselves how to function in that situation. I've always felt that the patriarchal blessing is a huge, huge plus that we don't use as often as we could, because here you have revelation given to you by a man identified for that purpose. And to pull that out every so often, as regular as you choose to, and do some homework on it and see what is meant to be in your life. It applies not only now, but through the eternities. So the application is there, whether you picked up the first blessing when you're 14 to 18 or even older.
Yeah.
But it's, in your 60s or your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there still may be some room to work here on this mortality that you don't know about, that maybe there's a blessing there that you just didn't realize, with all the gifts that you've been given by Heavenly Father. To be a member that, and to be a member of the church too is what did we do in the pre-existence to be honored with the fact that we were exposed to this marvelous gospel principle? It just sometimes amazes me.
Nice way to think about it.
Yeah.
And I love that. Were you at the fireside where we just recently talked about patriarchal blessings?
Yes.
Because I love the story they shared in that fireside. I think it was which president was it? Hinckley. Was it President Hinckley?
I think it was Hinckley.
He said that in his blessing, it talked about sharing the gospel, standing up and presenting the gospel to a broad audience, nations, I think it said, or something to that effect. And so for a long time, because he served his mission in a foreign country and he'd visited Paris and Germany. And so in his mind, he thought, I've checked that box. And I did what my patriarchal blessing said, and here years later he became the prophet, and of course had a much greater impact. So I think we should look at our patriarchal blessings that way too, because I've heard from people saying, especially as you get older, I got mine only 8 years ago, so mine is still very fresh. But as you get older, I think it's easy to say, oh, I've done all those things, and that might not be quite what God was saying to you.
Well, I had mine when I was 18, and just as I was finishing high school and going into college, and I thought that might be a good thing to understand whether I was a candidate for war because Vietnam was very, very strong and raging, or what my plans should be. And it gave some very, very good counsel to me as far as what my direction should be. And I look back on it, and it was just spot on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it does talk about gifts, and I've been wanting to do a podcast on leveraging our spiritual gifts and how we benefit from those, and how to take advantage of them. So we will do that going forward.
Another one's warnings. And that's another feature, is to be careful of certain things, because the world is what the world is. And it warns you about probably some of the things that maybe you hadn't thought about in your own personality that you should be sensitive to, and
or that you might be susceptible to. Yeah.
And I think susceptible is the big key.
Yeah. Mine doesn't have any warnings. I guess it's because I got it later in life, maybe. Kay doesn't like hers because it has a lot of warnings that she
Oh.
wishes she would have done. Sorry to out you, Kay, but that's what happens when you can't find the internet wherever you are.
Thank heavens you have the editing skills. This may or may not make it, so we'll see what
That's
happens.
right. That's right. But we'll do more on this because I think it's a really fun way to look at how to present yourself and creating your personal brand. And I do mean fun. This isn't a shape up
No.
conversation. This is a embrace who you are and think about how you're presenting yourself and
have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
I mean, that is really important because anybody that likes anybody likes them a lot of times because of their sense of humor.
Yeah, I like to laugh. So. Humor is good. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.